Most neighborhood barbecues end with empty plates and friendly goodbyes, not handcuffs and felony charges. But nothing in our HOA ever goes quite as planned, especially when Karen Thompson is involved. That Sunday afternoon started like any other, laughter echoing through the backyard of the community center, kids chasing each other with water balloons, neighbors chatting over plates of brisket and potato salad. I was mid-conversation about home renovations when the unthinkable happened. Karen lunged across the table and ripped the Rolex Submariner right off my wrist. I didn't even have time to process what was happening. One moment I was explaining how I finally got the bathroom tiles to line up, and the next, Karen had yanked the watch off like a prize snatched from a claw machine. She held it high above her head with the kind of satisfaction you'd expect from someone who just solved a major crime. Her voice rang out over the stunned silence. "This is exactly what I've been warning everyone about, a counterfeit Rolex." Gasps spread through the crowd like wildfire. Some people stepped back in confusion, others leaned in for a better look. Karen looked like she was preparing to unveil the crime of the century. What she didn't expect, however, was the calm but firm voice that cut through the chaos. "Ma'am, put the watch down and step back." It was Tom Martinez, an off-duty police officer and one of the few people who'd been quietly minding his own business at the grill. Within minutes, 2 squad cars were on the scene. Karen's smug expression dissolved as uniformed officers surrounded her and began asking questions. They took the situation very seriously, especially when Tom explained that the watch was worth over $12,000. Karen sputtered about HOA duties and fraud prevention, but the officers didn't care about her imaginary badge. All they saw was a woman who had just committed theft in front of 40 witnesses. But let me rewind a bit. This whole mess started about 3 weeks earlier when the HOA sent out invitations for our annual community barbecue. I was actually looking forward to it. Karen's antics aside, I liked connecting with my neighbors, catching up on local gossip, and letting my kids run wild for a few hours while I nursed a cold beer. I even decided to wear my prized Rolex Submariner, something I had saved years to afford and bought to celebrate a major promotion. It wasn't just any Rolex either, it was a rare, limited edition piece, one of only 500 made globally. I'd waited months for it to arrive. I walked into the community center's backyard, plate in hand, and felt a sharp gaze burn into my wrist. Sure enough, there was Karen, hovering near the registration table, glaring at me like I'd walked in wearing a crown made of gold bars. She leaned over and whispered to Margaret, her ever-loyal sidekick, who immediately turned to look at me like I'd done something criminal. I should have known then. Karen never liked when anyone else stood out. She had a habit of inserting herself into everything, from grass height disputes to Amazon delivery interrogations. In her mind, the HOA wasn't just a homeowners association, it was a throne she ruled from, and anyone who challenged her ideas of what was appropriate became a personal enemy. Apparently, wearing a luxury watch was a new form of rebellion. The first jab came casually, almost too casually, about an hour in. I was chatting with Mike from down the street about weekend fishing spots when Karen appeared beside us with a grin stretched so tight it looked painful. Her eyes flicked to my wrist, and she said, syrupy sweet, "My, what an interesting watch. It certainly looks expensive." The way she stressed the word "looks" made it clear she thought it was fake. Mike caught the tone and shifted awkwardly. I kept calm, answered politely, and tried to change the subject, but Karen wasn't done. For the rest of the afternoon, she dropped little bombs of passive-aggressive suspicion. "Luxury items like that aren't really common in our neighborhood," she mused loudly. "Some people go to great lengths to impress others, even with things that aren't real." Each time, her remarks got bolder, her tone sharper, and each time, I resisted the urge to call her out. She was baiting me, and I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. But then came the moment she couldn't resist the chance to turn the spotlight on herself. Right when the event hit its peak, with nearly 40 neighbors crowding around the buffet tables and picnic benches, Karen made her move. She cleared her throat like a school principal about to make an announcement and loudly declared that counterfeit goods have no place at an HOA function. The conversations fizzled out like dying firecrackers as people turned to see what she was talking about. She pointed to my wrist with the flair of a courtroom prosecutor. She claimed she'd been researching fake luxury watches and that mine fit all the warning signs. She hinted that I was trying to pass off a cheap replica to boost my image. Her eyes sparkled with self-importance. I calmly replied that my Rolex was 100% authentic, backed by paperwork and even a serial number that could be verified. But Karen wasn't satisfied. She dramatically claimed that documentation can be faked just like watches, and that the only way to be sure was to have it examined by an expert. Then, without warning, she lunged across the table. Her fingers locked onto my wrist, twisted the clasp, and yanked the Rolex off. The crowd collectively gasped. It was so fast and so aggressive that, for a second, no one knew what to do. Karen held up the watch like she'd captured a stolen artifact and declared she would take it to a jeweler to prove the fraud. I was stunned. Who just grabbed someone's personal property like that? I demanded she give it back immediately. She refused. She actually said I should be grateful that she was protecting the community. She waved the watch around, pointing at the bezel and the band, insisting they looked off, despite clearly having no expertise whatsoever. The scene drew in every guest at the barbecue. Some were horrified, others just watched, caught up in the drama. That's when Tom Martinez stepped forward. I didn't know much about him at the time, just that he was quiet, polite, and enjoyed smoked sausage more than small talk. But his tone was all business as he told Karen to return the watch immediately. Karen's smug mask started to crack. She said she was within her rights as HOA president to investigate. Tom calmly explained that even HOA presidents aren't above the law, and what she had just done was theft, plain and simple. When she still refused to hand it back, Tom called for backup. 2 squad cars arrived within minutes. The officers took statements from multiple neighbors, including Mike, Margaret, who now looked thoroughly panicked, and Tom. When they learned the watch was worth more than $12,000, things escalated quickly. Karen tried to claim it was a misunderstanding, and offered to return it if everyone just dropped the issue. But the lead officer, Sergeant Williams, made it clear, a crime had been committed, witnessed by dozens of people. My decision to press charges would determine what happened next, and I didn't hesitate. Karen had humiliated me, invaded my personal space, and literally stolen from me, all in some twisted attempt to prove a point that didn't exist. I told the officers I wanted to press charges. Karen's face crumpled. Her protests turned to desperate pleas. Sergeant Williams read her rights. She was handcuffed and led away in front of the entire neighborhood. Some people whispered, others stood in awkward silence, but no one stepped forward to defend her. My Rolex was returned after being documented as evidence. The officers were respectful and professional. Karen, however, would face very real consequences. She was charged with felony theft, released on bail, and her fall from grace was immediate. The HOA board convened an emergency meeting and unanimously voted to remove her from her position. No one wanted to be associated with the woman who got arrested at a barbecue for stealing a neighbor's watch. When the case finally went to court, I brought the full documentation. Not only was the Rolex authentic, but it was also a collector's model valued at significantly more than $12,000. That only made things worse for Karen. The judge handed down a sentence of 6 months in jail, 3 years probation, and over $15,000 in fines and restitution. Her expression as she heard the verdict was blank, like someone who couldn't believe their fantasy of authority had led them here. That was the last time I saw Karen Thompson. Her desperate grab for control cost her everything she thought she was protecting, and all it took to unravel it was one reckless moment and one very real Rolex. If you thought HOA drama couldn't get more intense, think again.